All right. I'm Beth Young. I'm the co-chair and I am the OBPAC member representing planning and local government.
I'll jump in. I'm Mike Bork, OBPAC member, brand new. This is my second meeting.
My name is Nolan. I'm an OBPAC member, and I'm representing the youth position, I suppose. I think it's under 21. This is my first meeting, so I'm just getting used to stuff.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm Dave Thompson. I'm a OBPAC member ex officio, and this is my second meeting.
Hi, Josh Orfenberg. I'm a OBPAC member. I think this is about my third meeting, and I live in Milwaukee, Clackamas County area.
Thank you. Emma?
Emma Newman, OBPAC member for several years, and good to see everyone. I am in the Springfield, Oregon area.
Fantastic.
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good. Andre Lightsey Walker. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a at-large OBPAC member, and I live in the Portland metro region.
All right, is that all of our members present? All right, I do have the unfortunate information that Lauren has decided to step down. She will not be attending today, but we are very grateful that she has been here in the past. Do we have any guests that would like to introduce themselves? If you would like to do public comment, if you could put your name and organization in the chat, that would make it easy for us to follow along. So any guests that we have, please introduce yourself.
Hi all, this is Tracy Pearl, manager of the Transportation Safety Office. I work closely with Heidi Manlove and Leanne Ferguson in regards to bike and ped safety and safe routes to school. Thank you.
Welcome. Marcia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I can do that. My name's Marcia Hoskins, and I have in the past been attending these meetings as the Policy and Implementation Manager for the Public Transportation Division. As of tomorrow, as Stephanie Kuntz leaves us to head over to Parks and Recreation, I will be the interim Public Transportation Division Administrator until the permanent recruitment is complete and a new administrator is on board.
We will miss you. Any other ODOT that we haven't been introduced to?
Sure, I can introduce myself. Hi there, good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Zellner, and I am the Interim Policy and Implementation Manager at Public Transportation Division. And this, I believe, is my third meeting I've been able to attend, so thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Alan Thompson. I'm the Oregon Community Pass Program Manager. That's it.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and nice to see you all. My name is Dorian Pacheco. I use she, her pronouns. And I joined ODOT in November as the Innovative Mobility Program Manager. As of about 2 weeks ago, I've entered a rotation behind Jessica Horning, so I'll be supporting you all through the next couple of months. So I'll be the interim Pedestrian and Bicycle Program Manager through the end of May. And I'll be supporting you all at the November meeting and onward. Nice to see you. I'm sure I'll connect with you all before our November meeting as well.
Perfect.
Hi, my name's Liam Ferguson. I'm trying to hold space for the staff facilitator for OBPAC while Jessica's on her rotation while we're bringing Dorian on. So this will be the last meeting that I staff for OBPAC, but I will be here in support of Dorian as she staffs OBPAC in the future.
Wonderful. Did we miss anyone?
I'll introduce myself. This is Roberto Cotto. I am the Active Transportation Program Analyst over at PTD. And in my role, I support different advisory committees and also run the EECP program for our advisory committees. Any other ODOT staff that are joining us, you are welcome to put your name, title, and your role in the chat room so we can document that. And just a reminder for folks who wish to make a public comment, please write that down in the meeting chat room or raise your hand once we get to the public comment section.
Wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and move on with our meeting. So meeting etiquette, yes, if you'd like to talk, please put some information in the chat so that we can acknowledge that and acknowledge you. And OBPAC members, if you guys could leave your cameras on, that is fantastic in the way we want it to be so we can see your smiling faces. Everybody, except for maybe Beth. Goals for today's meeting, we're going to talk about some recruitment challenges because we have a couple positions to fill. We'll be talking about the STIP 24-27, which we've had a couple of conversations about, but we'll be continuing in that. And then our work plan discussion, aka we have tons of new people part of this group, and we need to make sure that they are feeling that they get to do stuff. So that is coming on. And so public comment, I do not see anybody in the chat. I know that we received a handful of letters.
Is this the time when we comment on public comments? Or
now would be a perfect time to comment on public comment.
Okay. I have one on each, actually. The first one from Leslie Myers. Because I am with the city of Newport, and her comment was on a Newport facility that she would like to see. I would recommend that she go to the city of Newport City Council meeting and suggest that happen there. Because they are the boss of the city engineer, who is the one who makes these decisions along with ODOT people. I have talked to our local active transportation liaison, and we agreed, and she's been saying this for a long time, that these the request was for among other things. One suggestion was a rapid flashing beacon with a crosswalk in the middle of the street. And the comment that we both have is that ODOT should do maintenance, should include maintenance. ODOT installs these rapid flasher beacons, but then the local jurisdiction has to maintain it. And especially in the coast, these I've seen so many of the actual signage fall off or be flung across the street in a big storm. I didn't see it happen, but I saw the results, and it's very dangerous. And also our city is having had problems with vandalism, and the actual flashers were removed, and it took I don't know if it's still replaced. So so what the result is that the pedestrian thinks that the cars are seeing some sort of rapid flashing beacon, but they're actually not. Another very dangerous situation. Our cities and all jurisdictions probably, they don't have a lot of money to maintain these kinds of things, and have been experiencing staffing shortages due to COVID and other reasons. And so if ODOT is going to install one of these things, it would be wonderful if maintenance could be included in that. So that's my comment on the first one. Second one is Dick Dolgonis wrote that we should be looking into new technologies, and I just wanted to comment that ODOT OBPAC does have a group which is comprised of Andre, and it's the e-bike is the name of it, but it's really new technologies encompassing all the new things that our roads are encountering. So that's kind of happening. And let's see, number 3 to Janine Run. I believe that's a Portland Metro issue, so I would recommend you talk to them. And I believe that maybe it might be a community path, a potential grantee of the Community Paths program. And Alan is here and he oversees that program. He's with ODOT. So you might want to look into that. And number 4, Shannon Wilson. I second that letter, and I would add that every part of the Oregon Coast bike route and any other designated bike routes have that kind of safety warning whenever there is when a bicyclist is forced onto the street. So that's my comments. And how are we on time? It is 1:15. So we already, so we only had 5 minutes, so we have 5 more minutes for that.
Do we have any other comments on the public comment? I do know that when I looked at them, they were all things that we have discussed, and they're definitely things that I find frustrating. There were 2 on there that were talking about 101 and some hazards within that area, which has been brought to our attention multiple times. And so I'm always excited for anything that goes into the making 101 safer. And then there was another comment about greenways. Yes, everybody wants a greenway near them, and the goal is to get there, hopefully. And then the last one was the definition of vehicle. I mean, and how we're integrating all this new technology. And yes, it is something that we have discussed. I have not yet to discover a good path to take this group down to fix all those ills, but that's definitely part of it. Anybody else have comment on public comment? Emma.
I appreciate all that, and I'm not sure I fully understand what our committee status on the appropriate interactions between different mobility device, kind of the newer technology piece is. And so may I just put a pin in that for later? I know that's in our work plan. I just don't know what's happening across the agency, kind of what's happening within our committee, and there might be some further steps we could take to get clarification, since we're hearing about this from local committees, from Dick's letter, from just conversation with people throughout the state.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else? Great. Approval for the meeting minutes from the July 2023 meeting. Everybody has hopefully had a chance to read through those. And I would love a motion to do something with them.
I move we approve the minutes as presented, other than the correction I believe that was already mentioned earlier. Or was that on this current agenda?
That was actually this current agenda, but
Okay,
thank you.
so never mind that last part.
I have some comments, but it can be after the second part of the discussion.
I will second the motion.
Okay.
Call for comments, Beth?
Yeah, not really changing the content, but a few words here that should be there or shouldn't, or, you know, minor changes. Should I go over them or? They're about 10 of them.
Now's the time, and then we'll have to make a new motion for the amendments.
My
Okay.
question is that, Beth, if they're not substantive, if they're just kind of like grammar or spelling or that kind of thing, if people are okay with staff sort of making like minor changes that Beth's sort of pointing out without going over each of them individually, just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know.
I would recommend that too.
Way clear.
So I would like to hold a vote of we pass the meetings as they are with the slight grammatic changes proposed by Beth. And Beth, you will get those to Leanne so she can make those changes, correct? Perfect. All right.
Yes.
Those in favor, let me see some thumbs. Opposed? Fabulous. Motion passes.
We also can share for the next OBPAC meeting, we can post both meeting notes at the same time so that you can see the small changes that thank you, Beth.
Yeah, I didn't have time to do that on our Google Drive, but I will do that in the future. Okay.
All right. Did everybody see Dave's comment? If we could correct that, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Where is that, Dave? Or maybe Leanne, you can catch it.
Yeah, it's in the agenda.
Yeah, it's on the member list on the website that just got updated too.
I appreciate that because I am always correcting people with my spelling too. All right, moving on. Division updates. Stephanie, tell us all the things that have been happening.
So we have a slight update in that today is actually Stephanie Coons' last day, and she will be she's heading over to a job at Parks, and Marsha Hoskins is the new interim director for Public Transportation Division, and so Marsha is here to provide the updates in lieu of Stephanie.
Welcome.
Thanks. I will absolutely be able to give everyone an update on our recruiting as well as recruiting for the administrator position. And then I will continue to listen to the meeting for a while. I do need to apologize. I'm going to have to drop off because it is Stephanie Coons' last day and I need to pick her brain before she heads off to Parks since I'm going to be taking that on an interim basis. But from a recruitment perspective, couple months ago when Stephanie Zellner and Stephanie Coons joined us and I came back from retirement to act in an advisory role, Public Transportation Division had 15 vacant positions. So in a 40-some person organization, that's pretty significant attrition. Of the vacant positions, we are currently either actively recruiting or in fact have actually recently filled 8 of those positions. So we've cut the vacancies down in half or will soon. Probably the most important one is the division administrator position. That position was posted externally and internally. It closed last Friday. There was some significant outreach done by our recruiting organization to try and make sure that it was publicized so that we would get interested and qualified candidates. And then a team is now reviewing those applications. So that's in process. Obviously, it isn't going to be done by October 1st, hence my interim assignment, because there will probably still be a bit of time to get a division administrator on board and then transition some of the knowledge and initiatives to that new person. You heard Dorian Pacheco introduce herself. She is filling the bicycle pedestrian program manager position behind Jessica, who is doing a rotation in the delivery and operations unit. Excuse me. Dorian was previously the innovative mobility program manager, and she'll be supporting OBPAC and is currently in the process of taking that role over from Leanne. So you heard Leanne mention that Dorian will be facilitating the next committee meeting. We had a vacancy in our program services unit in public transportation division, which is the unit that actually does the nuts and bolts work to get our grant agreements out the door. We have filled that with an internal employee on a rotation position. So Drew Orr is taking over our grant and program services unit. We had a position open, Stephanie Zellner did, for training program coordinator, largely supporting external public transportation providers and other multimodal transportation types of external folks. And Stephanie has offered that position. It's been filled, and she will have a new training program coordinator starting next Monday, October 2nd. So you'll be seeing an announcement on that soon. We also have a technical resource center coordinator vacancy in Stephanie's shop. And this position manages our state public transportation funding that's allocated or directed at training and technical assistance. That position is currently in recruitment, and they are continuing to do interviews for that, hoping that they'll be able to wrap that up in the next few weeks. Our financial manager position, I don't know that many of you ever worked with Andrew O'Keefe. Andrew was largely on the public transportation side of the division, but he left us a couple of months ago, and we have ended up splitting out his position. So we now have a position in the ODOT Financial Services Budget Office that strictly supports the Public Transportation Division. Additionally, we have obtained 2 new positions to do some federal fund coordinating that needs to be done in our program services shop to apply for Federal Transit Administration funds and get those basically in our bank account so that we can then proceed with reimbursing our public transportation providers. And lastly, we have a compliance program coordinator position also in the program services unit that works with our external public transportation providers to make sure they are meeting state and federal requirements for being a recipient of ODOT funds. That position should be posting next week, so you should also see that on the ODOT jobs website. That leaves us with 7 vacant positions, which is still way too many. And we're continuing to work on preparing to recruit those remaining positions. So I very much appreciate that. We will try and flag those for you as they come open, because potentially you may know folks who would be interested in those. We are always looking for new talent. And so this continues to be a top priority to get our unit fully staffed and back functioning at a high level. So that's the not so quick, but somewhat abbreviated update on staffing. It basically has preoccupied all of the manager minds for the past few months, trying to continue to recruit and get people on board. So thanks.
Thanks, Marcia. I've sort of put myself on talking about the schedule for 2024 for OBPAC meetings, but before we switch to me and take Marcia off the hot seat, just want to make sure that if any OBPAC members have any questions. Time for that.
I have a stupid question. Why is it that you're having so many vacancies? I mean, is it an internal thing where people are quitting, or are they just, is that something that we can cure, or is it they're aging out? What's going on?
I can say that actually agency-wide, Mavis, retaining employees is a problem, right? It is still the kind of market where there are a lot of openings and not so many candidates. So it has been really hard to keep staff. Most of our staff have moved on to newer, better jobs that perhaps better suited them or were ones they'd always wanted to go for. And it was sort of this perfect storm. I think as everyone transitioned out of the pandemic mode, they had all that time to think about, I think it's a good time to change careers. And it was a candidates market. Agencies are hiring, offering bonuses, all kinds of things to try and get staff on board. So I think we just got caught in a perfect storm. I think that included in our division's issue were some manager turnover. And so when you lose managers, it seems to really compound the staffing error, right? If your manager leaves, frequently people are also thinking, okay, it's a good time for me to look. Plus you have trouble then getting the recruitments on board without a manager in the seat to do the hiring. So it just was like this perfect storm. I think at one point I'd been told we had 22 vacancies. So 22 down to 15 down to 7. It's all good progress, right? So.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So with support from Mavis, I can move ahead with the scheduling conversation, but I think Marcia might stick around at least for the next 5 minutes. So if we come back around to, if you think of any questions, we can come back around to Marcia. But I'm going to share my screen. This is also a visual that is included in your materials for this meeting. I want to say a big thank you to everyone for filling out the survey to help us schedule future meetings, and a big thank you to Roberto and Dorian who did our data analysis to provide us with this high level information. So I'll just sort of go over where we are right now, and then I'll pause for a second and make sure that this is the right direction before we actually send out all the calendar invitations and things like that. So for our November OBPAC meeting, which is already on the calendar, based on everyone's feedback, it sounds like we can leave it on the calendar where it is on November 28th. We have 2 members who said maybe, but in general, it seems like that, so that we might have some change. We might not have a full team, but enough. There was enough people that said that worked that we thought we should probably leave it. The other recommendation is to leave the Office of Social Equity training on the calendar, which is currently scheduled for Tuesday, January 23rd from 2 to 3:30. Everybody generally said that time works and are open to coming in person if we can get a good location. So that is, so those 2 are already on your calendars, and we recommend that they stay on our calendars in the place where they are. For 2024 online meetings, what rose to the top was a recommended 4th Wednesdays from 1 to 4 p.m. in odd months: January, March, May, September, and November. We've skipped July in there because that will be our in-person meeting, but that's why July is not mentioned. So that's what we're recommending: 4th Wednesdays, 1 to 4 p.m. based on everyone's feedback. And then a recommendation for the in-person meeting will be July 18th, around 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There might be a little bit of wiggle room in there. We had a lot of feedback on the timing, but that seemed to, in general, work for most folks. So I'll pause for discussion. Folks can look back at your calendars and just double check that these are going to work based on your feedback. But after this meeting, if we get to yeah, let's do it, Dorian and Roberto will start getting those on our calendars. So any questions around the scheduled meetings that are already on your calendar or the recommended schedule for 2024? Also want to note that this does not, the recommendation will mean that it does not conflict with the agency leadership team meetings. So we'll be able to have agency leaders come to OBPAC. It also aligns with the January 23rd equity training. If we do fourth Wednesdays, the equity training will be on that Tuesday, and then OBPAC will be on that Wednesday. So if y'all do want to have an in-person OBPAC meeting, you could stay over and have them back to back. And it does not conflict with the Safe Routes to School Advisory Committee meeting or the Public Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. So those are kinds of the things that we're taking into account.
Question, Leanne?
Yeah.
What was the ratio of people who wanted the in-person meeting to be 1 day versus the 2-day situation? I mean, was it kind of even, or was it overwhelming? OBPAC people want it to be all in 1 day.
I'm gonna see if either Roberto or Dorian can answer that question, since they helped do the data analysis. And if not, I will get back to you. And I'm sort of curious, I'm guessing that you were hoping for a 2-day.
Yeah, that's kind of a leading question. Yeah, indeed. I would like it that, and I will request my fellow OBPAC members to reconsider, because that when it's the setup that it has been, it's really easy to get my company to pay for 1 night. I doubt I could get them to pay for 2 nights. And also, if I do 1 night, I would do it the night before and then probably drive home at night, which is not very safe for me going over the coast mountains, or even on the coast if it happens to be on the coast. So I wouldn't mind if people reconsidered that.
The good news is we have additional time. Like we can like if it's in July, we have some time to reassess. So we could also move forward with sort of what we've got up here and put a pin in the July meeting to reconsider a 2-day. Yeah, Michael.
I think I was one of the ones that asked for a 1 day, and it's really purely for July and August are really tough in the Parks and Recreation world to take a full day off, let alone 2. But I have not been to these meetings. Are there enough breaks scattered in that we can still be responding to work stuff if need be? So I mean, I'm not opposed to a 2-day, but when I was asked, a 1 day is much easier to schedule on my end work wise.
Thanks, Mike.
I just have a question. Are the in-person meetings, I know they're always in a different location, and I knew that it was in Medford last year, but also on the website it says they're usually in Portland or Salem. Do you know where the meeting would be this coming year in any capacity? Because that would change a lot for me, because if it was in one of Portland, Salem, or Eugene, I wouldn't have to get a hotel or like do anything with that, because I have residencies or like people I can stay with there.
I'm gonna actually see if anyone on OBPAC can answer that question better than I can. Just because I'm not sure if y'all have a list of where you like to go, where you usually go. If not, I can find out from past staff and get back to the group. But if people have been on OBPAC a little bit longer can answer, I'd appreciate it.
I'll answer. Generally, we try to find somewhere that they're doing something cool. So like the reason we went down to Medford is Alameda had a huge fire come through, and it burned everything. It burned the town. And so we went down there to check out what they're doing, and they're doing fabulous things. So that was the reason we went to Medford, was really just to see those projects and look at them and really understand any impact, if any, that we're having. So basically we get to choose where we want to go. We've gone to the coast a couple times. It's always nice to check out the 101, because as we talked about earlier today, it is a lot of people bike it right now. So the world is our oyster.
Go ahead, Emma.
I just want to chime in and support answering Mike's question about what is it like to be at the travel meetings. How I've seen it work in my experience with OBPAC is we usually meet in the afternoon of the first day. So you'd have some time in the morning, you'd have some time in the evening if you need to respond to some work stuff. And then we'd usually do a field visit or do something outside of the conference room on the second day, which is really nice to get to know local staff, get to know local advocates, kind of get out in the community and do something different. I think if we had it all in one day, I would really want to have stretch breaks and change of scenery so that we're not just sitting in a conference room from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. because I don't think that's going to be productive and as valuable. So I think if we do the 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., that likely means that people who have to travel further, that is 2 nights in a hotel to be well rested for travel. If we do it with the split days, then it's probably just 1 night stay, except for maybe Mavis, who tends to fly across the state and travel the furthest out of all of us. So just some considerations. I'm open to either, just whatever is kind of the most cost and time effective and allows us to show up fully present and well rested.
I think I'd like to recommend that we go ahead and move forward with the online meetings in November and January, and then move to talk a little bit more about the in-person meeting at either the November meeting or the January meeting, so we can start getting ideas around locations, and probably depending on the location, I think will really affect if people can do a 1-day meeting or need a 2-day meeting. That's my guess. How do folks feel about that?
I just have a quick question before I say anything.
Sure.
Is the January meeting a special meeting is it a training thing instead of a meeting, or is it a training and a meeting and the meeting isn't scheduled yet, but the training has been scheduled?
Right now, the training is on the calendar for Tuesday, January 23rd. OBPAC requested, based on the information we got from OBPAC members, the idea is that folks would rather have a Wednesday or a Thursday meeting on a regular basis. So my thought was to have the training on the Tuesday and then have our OBPAC meeting on that Wednesday and have them back to back, because the training's, I think, on the calendar for about 2 hours. So we really wouldn't, if we tried to combine the training and the OBPAC meeting, there wouldn't be a lot of time for an OBPAC meeting. It would kind of be just training. So right now, my recommendation is to have 2 gatherings in January, one on a Tuesday and one on the very next Wednesday. So that's the current recommendation.
All right. Yeah, I think that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Where is the January meeting? I think you said, but I missed it.
Right now, if
for the training.
Yeah, folks are I believe for trying to do it in person. From our Office of Social Equity, I believe that Salem or Portland would probably be the location for that meeting, and we would have a hybrid option for anybody who can't make it out. But if folks are traveling out for the training and want to stick around, we can do a hybrid January OBPAC meeting as well if we do them back to back.
Thanks.
Great questions, everybody. To keep us on track, we're gonna punt talking about the in-person meeting in July, either at our November meeting or our January meeting. And Roberto and Dorian can help get these 2024 meetings on your calendars so that we can save the space for it, and we will find a location for that January Office of Social Equity training soon, so that we can figure out if we can also have an in-person OBPAC meeting on the next day as well, or a hybrid meeting and start figuring out those logistics. Thank you very much for providing your input. It was super helpful in pulling this schedule together.
Okay, and the timekeeper says we're 2 minutes behind. Not bad.
I think I also have the next agenda item. So let me know, Mavis, if you just want me to keep rolling. Okay, so The next agenda item is our recruitment discussion. So at our last Oregon Bike and Ped Advisory Committee in July, we had a pretty robust roundtable at the end, roundtable check-in at the end of the meeting around our recruitment and how we bring new members on, and the composition of OBPAC, bringing different voices to the table that we usually don't hear from. So what staff thought to do for a follow-up, since we're a new committee, is to kind of go through and just educate ourselves, because a lot of us are new as well as the committee, on how that recruitment process worked. And then staff provided a couple of recommendations for things that we can do differently next time that we think might be able to allow a more diverse candidate of new members coming on in the future. And there's also an opportunity for OBPAC to discuss what are things that you also want to do in light of our recruitment process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and present a PowerPoint that is located in your materials. And I'm going to double check that folks can see it. Can people see my screen, a big PowerPoint presentation? Awesome. And I want to start with again a big thank you to our two OBPAC members for continuing to push this committee to be the best that it can possibly be, representing a diverse group of Oregonians to make the best possible decisions we can around bike and ped initiatives in the state. So thank you so much, members, for pushing us and helping ODOT to be better, and the state to be better, actually, since y'all are governor appointed. So again, we'll go over committee composition, 2023 recruitment summary, applicant information, challenges, and then we'll have a discussion. I also want to point out that this is challenging. I mean, I'm a little bit nervous just presenting the information. So, because we do have new members, and I want you all to feel welcome. And we do have some issues with diversity on our committee, and we want to bring that forward. So at the same time, I want to hold a welcome for our new members and do a little bit of critiquing on how the process happened. So please bear with me as we do this all at the same time. And I have so much gratitude for you all. And please feel free to ask me any questions throughout this process. I'll stop there and just do the information, but wanted to say that out loud. A lot of appreciation for our new members and our existing members, and helping us be better and better in this committee. So a little bit about OBPAC composition. OBPAC is created in Oregon statute, and it tells us that the committee shall consist of 8 members, and that the committee shall also ensure that memberships reflect the racial and ethnic and ability composition of the state as determined by the most recent American Community Survey from the United Census Bureau. And I've included some information about that in the next slide. The light blue boxes on the left sort of lay out what the committee needs to represent: a local government land use representative, an environmental representative, bicycle business, Oregon Rec Trails Advisory Committee rep, under 21 rep, 3 at-large members, and right now we're piloting an ex officio member. And our current composition is in the chart on the right, which says your name as well as what category you sort of fill in OBPAC to help us meet the statute. So so that's what we've got here, all except Lauren Morris, who's actually stepped off, and so we will have an empty spot there, which actually gives us, I mean, we will miss Lauren, but it gives us actually a great opportunity to discuss our recruitment now, and then try to do it better immediately, because we'll need to fill Lauren's position. So the Oregon data from the American Community Survey really highlights people with disabilities, and that's at about 10.2%. And then it highlights racial demographics in Oregon, which white alone is about 85.9%. Black or African American is 2.3, American Indian is 1.9, Asian is 5.1, Hispanic and Latino is 14.4. So those are kind of those are what the statute is calling us to do. I wanted to provide a little bit more information about a flow chart of what happens when a vacancy opens on OBPAC. So generally, OBPAC identifies a subcommittee, which is usually the organizational health subcommittee of our work plan. And then we put out an application announcement, and then the OBPAC subcommittee completes interviews and makes the recommendation. And then it goes to the governor for approval. So in 2023, our subcommittee made recommendations. In March, ODOT staff or OBPAC selected early 2023, OBPAC selected the subcommittee. In March of 2023, ODOT posted the application, and the subcommittee reviewed and selected new candidates to fill the roles. We were looking for an under 21 member and a public member, and they created the new ex officio position. And then July 2023, Governor Kotek approved the new members. A little more about the timeline for 2023. So with a little bit more information. So in March, when we opened the solicitation, we actually had 48 applications. Staff in the subcommittee selected who to interview, and we vetted the applications through compliance with House Bill 2985 to ensure membership of the advisory committee reflects racial, ethnic, and ability composition of Oregon. At that time, using that sort of like pretty low bar of just like mirroring the demographics of Oregon through the survey, through that household survey, OBPAC was meeting the minimum requirement. So the subcommittee was really focusing on that under 21 position, as well as people with disabilities, because that's where we weren't quite in alignment. So the subcommittee did interviews, and they interviewed 5 applicants, and they made their recommendation to Governor Kotek to invite 2 new members plus 1 ex officio position that was added. And then in July, the governor approved those additions, and the new members joined our July meeting. So I think that is important to kind of go over our applicant demographics. So we did receive 48 applications. We had 100% of those have used English as their first language. 64% were male, 17% identified as people of color, 23% identified as having a disability, and the average age of our applicant was 49. Here's a little bit more about the applicant demographics in chart form. The new information that wasn't included on the slide before is this lower right-hand corner, where we kind of divided just to show you a geographical representation of who the applicants represented. So region 1, we had the most applicants. So that's the light blue. The dark blue is region 2. Region 3 is not represented. We did not have anyone from ODOT region 3. Region 4 is yellow, and region 5 is green. For those new to ODOT, the regions are how we divide up the state. I remember when I was new to ODOT, and I thought it sounded like Hunger Games, like all the different regions and the districts and stuff like that. So region 1 is in the Portland metro area. Region 2 is south in like the valley, so Salem and Eugene. Region 3 is still on the west side, but like the Medford all the way out to Coos Bay area. There we go. Region 4 is the center of Oregon, from the Dalles to Bend down to Klamath Falls. And region 5 is pretty much all of eastern Oregon is all region 5. So we did have a pretty good spread of applicants. However, we didn't have anyone from Region 3, so that Southern Oregon area. So we had 48 applications, and we only interviewed, I think we interviewed 5 people. And so the demographics of the folks that we interviewed were a different subset than the folks that applied. So again, 100% were English as the first language. Of the folks that we interviewed, 80% were male, so that's actually higher than our applicant pool. Of the people that we interviewed, 0 were people of color, which is a lower percentage than our applicant pool. 40% identified as having a disability, which is above the average of our applicant pool. And the average age of applicants interviewed was 36, which is below the average age of our applicant pool. So you can tell from this slide that our interview committee really focused on people with disabilities and young people for the selection process. So that's my overview of what we did. Some of the challenges were that none of this information came back to OBPAC to discuss before it went to the governor for approval. Another challenge is that the interviewees didn't really match the demographics of the applicants. Like we narrowed in on the applicants, and so we had a different demographic of the interviewees versus the larger applicant pool. And that the statute required goal is for the committee demographics to meet Oregon demographics. That may or may not be the goal of OBPAC members. And I don't think that OBPAC had that discussion before this process, although I'm not positive about that. So there are a couple of recommendations that we had on the staff side, and then we really want to open it up to discussion for more ideas from OBPAC members. And I know that Emma chimed in over email, so I think that we'll have a great time for discussion. But our recommendation is to add 2 full OBPAC discussions into the process, and I'll show you what that could look like on the next slide. We also can do a presentation to OBPAC about other ODOT committees' recruitment policies. There might be some more room for improvements. There's also a whole world out there of other ideas that OBPAC might want to explore. Here's sort of the example of if we added 2 new steps into our recruitment process, we might be able to have a more robust conversation and a better recruitment process in the future. So when a vacancy opens, OBPAC as a whole discusses what perspectives are we missing within our group? What do we want to focus on this recruitment? And then they can designate a subcommittee. Staff can do the announcement, the subcommittee can review it and do interviews, and then we check back in with the full committee before the information goes to the governor to approve. So that's an example of a way to change the process so that we can have a more robust discussion and a better recruitment experience overall. I believe that's my last slide. It is. So I'm going to stop presenting so that we can all see each other. And I would love to answer any questions. And when we're done with questions, it would be great to start discussing, like, what are some other ideas that you all have for recruitment? So open floor, what question can I help answer?
Leanne, could I ask you to go back to the slide beforehand? I know you want us all to see each other.
Yeah, which slide would you like to see?
The last one.
Oh, great, yeah.
Maybe just for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Are folks able to see this? I'm keeping it in the slideshow form. Okay, so I can move around if you would like to see another slide. An example might be like if we decide to update the process, then in our November meeting, we would have time on the agenda to talk about the next recruitment that we need to do to fill Lauren's position, and we would talk about what are the goals of that recruitment. Yeah, Dave.
So I know in our last meeting, there was some discussion about changing the committee makeup, the statute that defines the committee makeup. And that, didn't happen in the short term, but is that something that could be pursued in the longer term? I mean, given your earlier slide that breaks it out, right? It just is going to make it very difficult, I think, to hit the sweet spot, whatever that is that we're aiming for, just because things are subdivided so many different ways and there's so few total positions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As OBPAC is a advisory committee to the governor, I think that you all can that OBPAC can definitely advocate for changing that statute. At this point in time, I'm unclear on what ODOT's role in that may be, but OBPAC can definitely advocate through I think through the governor's office for that, but I'd have to check what that process would be, but it's something that I think would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I would suggest that we either need more spots to create more public, I'm not sure what the right term is, but more non-defined spots, general spots, or we need to eliminate some of the defined ones to create a better chance of not being constrained as much when we're trying to fill these spots.
I like the idea of adding spots. And I also like the idea on the slide. If you're ready to take it down, Leanne, that's fine with me. Yeah, I like the 2 check-ins. I think that's a great idea. I have to say, I didn't know about that we were going to have an ex officio person at all. And so it came as a surprise to me, and we weren't, I don't know if ODOT decided that or OBPAC decided that or the nominating committee decided that. Do you have information on that, Leanne?
I believe it was the subcommittee, and I believe it was a desire to have more representation from different parts of the state.
Oh,
like more of a geographic balance.
I can answer that.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Del.
Yeah, we had so many good applicants, and since we only had 2 spots available, we just really wanted to select one more, and it was also a geographical one because we didn't have any representatives from Central Oregon, and of course Dave perfectly filled in just about every box we were trying to check, except for filling in the 2 slots we were looking for. So we just requested a extra spot just so we would not have to reject a perfectly good application.
Okay, I'd like to comment on that. I was very surprised that the nominating committee could add a spot without checking with OBPAC at all. I think they should have done it. I think they should have checked with us before they added a spot. Came back to us with those comments and say, what do you guys think? That's my comment.
I sort of thought we did that, but maybe we missed something along the way.
I don't recall that. Does anybody else recall that? Did I miss something? I've been to all the meetings. Go ahead, Emma.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because I wanted clarification on the ex officio position as well. And I was looking through my notes and trying to figure out like, what was that? I have a vague recollection that there might have been some sort of informing announcement, but I do not believe that there was a question posed and a committee discussion at any point. But my memory is not super clear.
Mike, your hand has been up for a little while.
Not about this, but now that we're discussing this, I mean, I don't want to pretend to know what happened before we got to last meeting, which was my first. But you know, ex officio usually, obviously, they're non-voting members, but you know, in a general sense, they're usually somebody that has knowledge that's needed by the board. So provides guidance, but doesn't actually have a vote in the process. And I know, Dave, you know, we've all discussed that you're here. So it does seem odd from a process perspective that a subcommittee would have created an ex officio position. I'm assuming, was that also a governor appointed or governor approved action? Nothing against Dave. I'm just really more interested on the process side of how that happened with it being a very defined board size.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why staff wanted to move forward with updating the process, because there didn't seem to be like a back to OBPAC after the subcommittee. It seemed to be like a delegation to the subcommittee. So we really highly recommend updating that process so that it comes back to OBPAC. I am not clear if we asked the governor, if staff asked the governor to approve an ex officio member or not, since it's not written in the statute. So I can find out about that. But I do think that talking about like what didn't go really well the last time is really important. And I also think that like starting to look to like, how do we want to address some of these issues moving forward, I think is also a really good idea. Mike, is your hand still up because you didn't get to the comment that you wanted to make?
Well, yeah, my only original question with the recruitment difficulties, as a couple have said, if we've got, for instance, this environmental position, is the difficulty because we have to pigeonhole and find, let's just say, of the next recruitment, another 49 people, and hope that one of them fits within the environmental realm? Or so by removing those specificities, which a lot of boards wind up doing, when you've got these very specific, you know, we're going to have a youth, we're going to have a you know, senior center. I mean, I've had it on a lot of my boards as well. So is that the difficulty? I mean, it sounded like that's way more applicants than I thought would have been in the original pool. So just that was my observation / question.
I believe that, well, I wanted to mention one thing, that in the past, like just using Lauren's vacant position as an example, if any of our at-large members actually sort of fit the environmental criteria, then we could move them into that environmental category, and then we could like just being really strategic about how to use the at-large, right? How to use the at-large position. So we haven't had any type of conversation like that yet, but that's something that we could look at just tangibly for this next round. And then once we do know what we're looking for, ideally using the statute as sort of the boundaries, but then this committee as well as like, what are our what would we like to prioritize in bringing new voices and new perspectives onto the committee. When we decide on those two things, that would go out in the announcement of like, this is what we're looking for. And then it would help people self-identify. It would help us as staff and you all as OBPAC members do outreach to people who would fit those needs. And then we would have a good pool of candidates. Did that answer your question, Mike? And then we'll go to Nolan.
I was just going to ask about, is the actual system like laid out in the PowerPoint of like how you select an applicant and go through that whole process? That's not controlled by the governor at all, is it? It's purely up to, okay. Because I was going to say, I wasn't part of the recruitment process at all, and I have no clue how much time it took from each person individually. But I feel like the board's already only 8 people. It's if you have a subcommittee in a board of 8 people, then you have like 3 people selecting the applicant. And I do think, yeah, at minimum, they should go back and talk to the rest of the board. But also, should the whole board just select the new applicant? I don't know how much time it takes to do all the interviews and everything, but it seems like it's already such a small group of people that a subcommittee would just be an inefficiency, because it's like just a lot more administrative, like communication stuff, when it just could be everyone's like, I don't like this person, or I think they'd be great for the board, or whatever. That's my 2 cents, but I have no clue how long it took. So I don't know.
I think I'm the only one with a question. Piggybacking on that, is that possible as a non-public meeting? Is it possible for us to have a working meeting or something like that?
If you're all, if I think it's over half of you, I'd have to double check on the rules, but if over half of y'all are all together, then I believe it has to be a public meeting. Basically quorum, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
Constitutes
So
a
it can't be
meeting.
done. It can't be done.
Can't be done as a subcommittee, but you could utilize your OBPAC committees, or you could schedule more OBPAC committee meetings. Yeah, Tracy's giving a thumbs up. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so that may have been, I don't know the reasons behind it, but that may have been why a subcommittee was it was delegated to a subcommittee, but it's potentially worth discussing if y'all want to do that as a full committee. Looks like Emma's hand is up next.
I guess some of my questions were around ex officio. I wasn't clear on that process, so just voicing that I think we could have been clearer with that. With the House Bill 2985 evaluation, I wanted to clarify which membership was evaluated, if that's just the continuing members only, which I am hopeful that it is, because if we're looking at the full committee makeup, but then people are dropping off, I think about how Aaron left, and then I don't know if he was, considered in the evaluation as a continuing member, but then he resigned right after. Any information on how that evaluation was done, just for clarity?
I don't know that. I don't know if Aaron was taking into account that he was going to leave. So I'm not sure.
Okay. And then with regards to the recommendation to have the 2 checkpoints, I think that there should be more guidance on the front end. I think that a subcommittee actually works pretty well because it moves things along outside of our full group meetings. And here we are today, an hour and 10 minutes in. And I feel like, there's a lot of updates. There's a lot of things to happen in our meetings. And if we tried to have recruitment process be part of that as well, we could spend a lot of our full committee meeting time just trying to exist as a committee, let alone actually do the power shifting, like change making work that I am here to do and engage in. And I think if there's a second checkpoint, I like checkpoints, and I'm concerned, having seen how long the recruitment processes can take and how many vacant positions there have been over the last several years. We've had a few meetings when we've been a full committee, and that's great. But here we are again today, where we're down 1 person out of the 8. And if we have 2 more checkpoints, and we know that Lauren's left as of today, we have our November meeting, maybe that's when we set the direction. Then we have our January meeting, maybe that's recruitment. Are we getting into March before the new person joins us? I don't want to go half a year with a vacant position. So I'm cognizant of choosing a process that sets the intention and direction, but doesn't delay so much that we are, like, our standard operating is a less than full committee membership. And then the other thing that's been on my mind is looking to our committee work program. The organizational health section, I think, has some good content and intentions in here that aren't fully implemented or maybe being thought of during the recruitment process. So we have a note about looking to the Government Alliance on Racial Equity questions and refining to better address equity. The overall section is embedding equity throughout the work that OBPAC does and supporting ODOT to further integrate equity throughout the entire agency. And so I think we need to be looking at what are the results that the system that we're part of and the organization that we're part of is producing. And I would like to see us going above and beyond the bare minimum of what the House bill requires and actually doing intentional recruitment and saying, okay, what voices are not represented? What people are most impacted by the decisions that the agency and our committee is making? And how can we make sure that those individuals have full access to engage and participate in OBPAC as a committee? Because looking around the Zoom screen, you know, we might on paper fulfill the requirements. And I think that to produce more equitable outcomes in the walking and biking realms for the state of Oregon, we need to be more intentional with not only checking the boxes that have to be checked, but going above and beyond, saying how can we recruit people who kind of bring more and more perspectives that aren't represented at this table. And I'd be curious to hear a little bit more from Dell. You mentioned that there were, I think, some other boxes that you were looking to fulfill with the ex officio member. Could you just elaborate a little bit more for me on kind of what the subcommittee discussions were and what those items were?
Roberto, are you still on here? Roberto and Jessica were both very active in this process with us. I was very new to the committee and myself, and you also asked about Aaron, who was leaving. He was one of the most active people in this subcommittee, like replacing himself. So yeah, I guess we didn't know exactly what we were doing, but I thought we had good direction, and
it does look like Jessica's turned her camera on. So Jessica was the staffing OBPAC during the recruitment. So I don't know if you want to provide a couple of details, Jessica. Jessica's also on the agenda later in the committee for her new role in delivery and operations, which is probably why she's popped in for this one. But if you want to provide a little bit of background, Jessica, about the ex officio member, or how that came about, that might be helpful for Emma's question.
Yeah, so the and I'm not even sure the ex officio is the right term for us to be using, but some sort of non-appointed member is something that the committee's talked about for a few years. Basically, when we started having conversations about how do you expand the committee, staff had some conversations with DOJ about what are the options. And got clarity that we can't add any voting members without changing the actual statute. So that was very clear, but that we did have ability to add ex officio or resource members, like folks who could participate fully in the committee or in working groups, just not being full voting members. That is allowed within the structure of the committee. So I don't think we consulted the governor's office on that, but we did work with DOJ to get clarity on that. And it's something that in the last few recruitment groups working groups had been discussed. And there were questions around, well, how do we do that and invite folks to participate in the committee, but not as full voting members without marginalizing folks, as we're also trying to, give a broader group of folks more voice at the table. So when we were doing the last working group, that I believe that was Dell, Aaron, and Lauren, with me and Roberto as the support staff for that work. We were really focused on the ability and racial ethnic composition of the committee. And then also there's a desire for geographic representation. Because I think one of the challenges we often have, and I think that chart kind of showed it, is we get a lot of Portland applications, but how do we make sure that we're representing the whole state as well? And we haven't had a Central Oregon representative since Jeff Munson stepped down probably about 2 years ago. So the conversation at the working group was, well, what if we try this ex officio position as a way of getting geographic representation? So then we're getting that expertise and perspective around the table and trying it out and working out the bugs, but not doing that with a representation where we're maybe like marginalizing or tokenizing somebody in the process. There's definitely, so that is something that the recruitment committee did come back before the interviews and before the recommendation to the committee, but it was a very brief update during the committee business. So we probably, I think definitely a lesson learned is that we did not have as much discussion about that with the larger committee as we should have. But that's kind of where that came from. And whether or not that logic checks out, probably a good thing to discuss with the larger group.
Thanks, Jessica. I want to note that we only have about 6 more minutes left for this at our for this meeting, and yeah, I wanted to make sure that people who hadn't got a chance to speak yet got a chance. Go ahead, Andre.
Sweet, thanks so much for the conversation. So first and foremost, I just wanted to give a really big thank you to Emma. I don't know if you all had a chance to read her letter. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's yeah, one of the best allyship pieces I've ever read in my life. So Emma, I really appreciate you very much. Yeah, and I think we've had a good conversation, and sort of my goal was to sort of start moving towards solutions. And Leanne, thanks for that presentation. I think the numbers were really great to see. I mean, terrible to see, but great to see, just like the process. We saw sort of, exclusionary recruitment practices numerically take place between the rounds. I think that's something that, there's often not a lot of light shed on that. And that system is happening all around in all kinds of recruitments. But there's also places that are pushing back. And I think OBPAC sort of has the opportunity to really, be creative in our approach. So a couple of notes I had, so I'm just like, I think first I wanted to say that I don't believe statute is a good baseline for the racial demographics of a committee. When you take into consideration the fact that the state of Oregon is founded on the exclusion of people of color from the state, we can't use contemporary information on racial demographics to be our guiding principle, because it would be based on white supremacy. So I think that is something, that's what I feel. There are some internet trolls that disagree with me. And so I just put that out there. They say, percentages, if the percentages line up, that's fine. So I think that's something you will have to ask yourselves if that's accurate. I would also say, I like the procedural adjustments. I think, if we apply those to this recruitment process, we would probably have different outcomes. We probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So I think the procedures that have been proposed are on point. I think there's another thing to engage around, and I didn't really have the opportunity to speak about this at our last meeting. I don't believe that racial diversity is the only thing that is important. Like, yes, it is critical, but I think it's also very important for us to think about what other identities are important to be reflected in a body of our work. we know that we have a racial equity problem on our committee. So yes, that is absolutely one of them. But what are other groups of people and identities that are not being reflected here in our group, and how do we address that? And yes, it's a small committee, but I don't think that's a good excuse. So a couple that came to mind is, English is the first language. That stood out to me. I don't know about you all, but that's my first language is English, and so I assume that's probably most of us. And so I think geographic representation is critically important as well. But I think we can also, there's this thing called intersectional identities. So we have the ability to, have multiple positions be filled by people with like a broad range of identities. And then I think the last thing I wanted to mention is when we think about sort of new membership, specifically if we're aiming to increase representation from communities of color, is that voting positions are absolutely critical. We live in a country that literally barred Black and brown people from participating in the act of voting. So when we think about something as small as a yay or nay in an OBPAC meeting, that actually has significant cultural power that we need to be sort of cognizant of. So those are the notes I have right now. And I just thank you all for being open to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Andre, for your comments and for like leading us towards like heading into what do we want to do next. Mavis.
Okay, so I want to wrap up so that we can take our break. And I've enjoyed this conversation. Moving forward, I would like to go with what has been put forward as what we should be doing. And I think we need to make a more cognitive level of like when that committee comes back to us, looking at those numbers and filtering them through and just Dave, I'm so glad you're here today, and I'm very sad we keep talking about you kind of in the third person. I do appreciate that we have another member here that isn't necessarily a voting member. I do wish that transition had been a little smoother and that we had realized what we were doing when we did it. And then, there was one other thing. I apologize. It has escaped me. It was a really good one though. So Leanne, would you like to kind of wrap us up and then we'll go for a break?
Yeah. So it sounds like we have a kind of go ahead, Emma.
Oh, just for next steps, I was gonna say thank you for presenting the numbers. I really appreciated all the staff work in developing the presentation. And I think to inform our next recruitment, because we have an opportunity to put this into practice right now, filling Lauren's position, I would love to see the current information about our current committee membership so that we know what do we have represented from different lived experiences and perspective here and now on the committee, to help inform what are the gaps that we want to specifically try to fill in this next recruitment.
Great.
Thank you for that. I remembered what my other thing was.
Yeah.
It was that this committee has been talking about this issue for a very, very long time. We're trying to move forward and we're trying to be proactive, and I would like to make sure that the rest of the committees of ODOT are also moving forward and being proactive, because if we are a silo in a pile of unpleasantness, then though we are doing fabulous things, I want to be making sure that is affecting all of the infrastructure, not just this one committee. So there we go.
Great. Okay, so let me see if I can do a real quick next steps.
Thank you.
For the next recruitment, we want to so maybe let's see. I think folks in general are okay with doing the new structure to add 2 touch points in with OBPAC. I think we could maybe like if everything goes to plan and OBPAC has a discussion saying this is who we want, this is the perspectives we want, and the subcommittee is like pretty easily able to fill all of those perspectives, then maybe there doesn't need to be a huge discussion back at OBPAC if it's like, hey, it worked, we did it, we got all the people, great. But if there's like, actually we're not getting there, like then we need to absolutely have a discussion at OBPAC, because we might want to go back out and recruit again instead of so there might be some wiggle room in there that we don't have to have 2 touch points if the subcommittee is able to meet all the requests of the committee. But let's put in 2 points to start, and then we might be able to narrow it down if later on. So we want to use the new structure. Oh, that's what it seems to be. And then for this next recruitment, we'll try out the new structure. We'll have a discussion at OBPAC in November about what the committee has and what we're missing, so that we know where we need to head for this next recruitment. And then there was a suggestion to work on the statute as sort of like your long-term plan. And I will say that that I believe agencies are starting to talk about their 2025 legislative concepts. So there could be an opportunity in the next month or two if OBPAC wants to start in on that venture, which will take a little bit longer. It'll be a long-term approach. So we could bring it back up in November, or we can talk a little bit more about it sooner than that if y'all want to consider writing a letter to the governor early on in this process saying, like, we know you're talking about 2025 legislative stuff. Here's something that we want to put forward. Yes, Mavis.
This conversation right here tells me that we need to check in twice, because we thought we were doing it right. We thought things were going great. We need to have that motion.
Got it.
It has to happen. And then as things are moving forward, how are we checking in with the other committees? Is ODOT doing that? How are we going to get a nice little presentation out of this? I really do want to see that all the other committees are following statute and whatever.
Great. So next steps, use new structure. In November, discuss who we are and what we're missing so that it can lead our next solicitation. And then checking in or learning more about other committees and how they are meeting the statute.
I want to be respectful of what Emma said about, moving things along. So do you think we could vote to adopt the new structure, the 2 meetings, so that everybody, goes on the record that works for them?
Yeah, I'm not sure that if we have to vote, and but I feel like it never hurts. Mavis and Emma or Beth, since the co-chair is the one who recommended it, I say we do it. Is that okay with folks? So it's basically add two touch points with OBPAC in the recruitment process. One before we start recruiting to identify the expertise we want to bring on the committee, and one before the recommendation goes to the governor.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, and
I'll make a motion to include those 2 touch points in preparation for our next recruitment and beyond.
Can I second as a co-chair? Okay, I second.
We have a motion on the floor. Emma, do you have discussion? Your hand's up.
Not on this.
Okay, thanks. All right, those in favor with those 2 touch points, go ahead and show some thumbs. Perfect, motion passes. Thank you. Emma, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to verbalize what I said in my written comments to the committee, that I am willing to switch from a voting at-large position to ex officio member. I invite other committee members to think about whether you might be interested in a similar, because that could be an interim step we could take as a committee, is have some current members shift to ex officio and free up some more positions to be able to recruit for. So we might be able to recruit for more than just Lauren's environmental vacant position. So food for thought. We'll see kind of where the conversation goes next time, but we have some tools in the toolbox before getting to the 2025 legislative session where we could do the statute changes.
That's
Thanks,
a great idea, Emma. And where is the letter? Where can I find it? Sorry, I haven't
I'll
read
send
it.
it out to the committee and I can resend it directly to you. And if you don't get it, please let me know.
I
Sure,
can also,
thanks.
Emma, can I put it in the meeting materials folder? Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And it references Hal's resignation letter too. So if you can put both attachments, that would be fantastic. So it'll be in our Google Drive.
I remember. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Beth.
Okay, we are late for our break. So everybody, we're gonna cut the break in half. So we will meet back here in 5 minutes. So at 2:37, we will be here again. See you soon.
Andre, did you see my email about the upcoming OTC meetings and STIP stuff?
I saw the STIP one. I don't know if I saw the OTC. Was it just a list of all the
It was
upcoming
it was
meetings?
just the upcoming meetings and seeing that
Yes.
OTC isn't going to be
Yeah.
a session like we thought. It's going to be in Corvallis, Albany area.
Yeah. I responded to those emails, I think. So we.
Oh, you know what? I had a storage issue with my emails. So can you resend me your responses?
Yes.
I think my storage didn't let your messages in.
Okay, no worries. Yep. Yeah.
Now we're having this chat. Awesome. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. Okay. Most of us are back, not everybody. First thing we're going to talk to when we get back to is the STIP engagement information. Leanne is going to talk a little bit about that, but Emma, I wanted to kind of give you a moment to because you went and you presented, and I'm sure you did an awesome job, but tell us about it.
Yeah, so I had a lovely bike ride over to Eugene on the Ruth Bascom River Path. It was good to go to OTC in person and give comment. They were responding some to the other comments provided. They didn't say anything in response to the message that I conveyed on behalf of our committee, speaking to the letter about, breaking down silos, restructuring the STIP. The agenda item that they had regarding the STIP on their September meeting agenda looked like it was just a recommendation from staff saying take I think it's $70 million of unallocated and put it into leverage. So it doesn't seem like there's as much happening with a STIP process as there has been in previous cycles. And for newer committee members, the STIP is the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. It's essentially a funding decision-making process where OTC says, here's all the different things we're going to allocate transportation dollars to. And then within those different areas, projects are funded. It goes through a project development process, and then the final allocations and things actually get constructed. So basically it's transportation funding throughout the state. I also saw on the OTC agenda item for the STIP later on their agenda that there was an emphasis that the allocation for ADA to address the lawsuit, the settlement case, was taking up a lot of funding. So, I mean, that's good that we're seeing more ADA ramps, and I'm worried that they're happening not in coordination with comprehensive complete street projects. So some of those ramps may need to be ripped out to actually get a better street design in the future that works for all the different ways that we want a street to work. And then the other piece was operating and maintenance. And at last count, I don't believe that there's any bike ped infrastructure that's actually getting covered. Like off-street paths has no funding mechanism for maintenance. So when ODOT says more money is going to operations and maintenance, because that has to be taken off the top before even looking at the money that's allocated in the STIP, that to me says that that's going to mostly automobile oriented modes of driving. So I think there's an opportunity to push a little bit more in our next message around maintenance for off-street paths and other walking and biking specific infrastructure. That's the short story. Happy to take any questions or however I can help. That's what I have.
Thank you so much for going and doing that. Leanne, are you ready?
I am.
Anybody
I feel
have
like,
any more questions? I'm sorry. No. Any more questions for Emma? Perfect. On to Leanne.
I feel like we might actually be able to get the agenda back on track because Emma basically covered everything that I was going to say in your short in your great overview. So I can kind of show the slides that Amanda and Mac presented to the I guess there's one slide that's probably adding a little bit more information. So I'll share my screen and I'll show a little bit about a little bit more about what Emma was talking about. Do you guys see a slide that is a chart with blue and yellow lines on it? Okay, so this chart shows what was allocated in 2024 through 2027 versus what we have in 2027 through 2030 in the statewide transportation improvement program. And again, this is a way that ODOT tracks federal funds, but because it's required to track federal funds this way, we often track state funds in this same process because it's public. So what this means is, is that the blue lines show how much was allocated in 2024, and the PAT column right here means public and active transportation. So that's the one that we're interested in this group. And you'll note that in 2024 we just had more money. So there's less money in 2027 for the STIP. So basically it's a constrained funding scenario during a time of inflation, which means that it's just a constrained time for funding. And in public and active transportation, we in the current plan for 2027, we'll get almost $600,000 in funding for public and active transportation. The bulk of that is for transit. I believe about 100 million of it will go to active transportation, about 31 million for paths, about 60 million for ped bike. Transportation options has about 8 million. The Safe Routes to School Education Program has about 4 million, and that's all in this yellow line right here. What Emma's talking about, the 70 million that the Oregon Transportation Commission is discussing, is this unallocated amount over here in this bottom right hand corner. So that little yellow represents the $70 million that's kind of extra. Like after ODOT does everything that we are required to do in law and in policy, there's about $70 million left over. And Emma's short description of what ODOT's proposing to the OTC, that we kind of use it for leverage, for those more multimodal projects, kind of what you're all asking for in your letter. That's the direction that staff is going and what they're recommending to the Oregon Transportation Commission. And there wasn't a lot of discussion from the Transportation Commission around another idea. So it seems like that's the way things are headed. So I wanted to just share this slide with you so that you could see what's currently going to be allocated in the 27 STIP, and then what that 70 million represents over here. And then this is the visual that Amanda Peets and Mac Lynn shared with the Oregon Transportation Commission around that $70 million of unallocated funds, wanting to kind of use those funds for leverage to on projects to kind of help meet our safety, climate, and equity goals, really work on those like multimodal corridors. And I'm not an expert in this one, so if you have any detailed questions, I would love to email the expert and get you an expert response. So I might not be able to answer them here, but I will write them down, and they're pretty good at responding. It's usually Travis Brower that gets to answer all my questions. Yes, Emma.
Thanks, Leanne. This is good tag teaming because you're reminding me, Mac Lynn came and sat down next to me and we had a little in-person check-in, which was great. He talked about this leverage recommendation, and I asked him, how does this differ from the leverage programs that existed, I don't know how many years ago, roughly half a decade ago, that my experience of them, having been local staff working in our area in Springfield, Eugene, kind of Lane County area, was that was pretty unsuccessful. And I think some of the leverage funds, like they went out to the region, so it was already being split up some. And I think that takes a sum of money and then makes it much smaller. And then I think that ODOT may have been avoiding some of the urban corridors where there's more need for walking and biking facility improvements, and serves more people who would be getting around using their own energy, because the leveraging of funds on like a rural highway could go further. And so my sense is that this leverage program is going to be different than the previous leverage experience that I don't think was a great one. But maybe we as a committee could ask a little follow-up of how will this leverage proposal be used in practice, and how will it further the walking, biking, like people-oriented modes of transportation?
Is that something that you'd like me to go ahead and send in an email to Travis now on behalf of the committee to get a more like technical staff answer? Or is that something that Emma, that you're hoping to do a public comment for the next OTC meeting, or is it a combo?
I think quicker is good. I'm kind of looking at other committee members and asking, are you interested in that same thing of how is this not repeating something from the past that didn't seem bike ped supportive and very successful and actually using the dollars more effectively and in alignment with what our committee wants? Go for it, Leanne. Thank you.
When you put it that way. Emma, are we about done? Because that's it's 2:48. We're 3 minutes over.
Got a hand up from Dave Thompson. Dave Thompson without a P.
Yeah, thanks. Real quick. So looking at the categories that on your slide that increased, right, in the face of a declining total budget, ADA, we know what that's all about and nobody can argue with it. Other went up and I didn't hear if we know anything about why or what.
I can actually answer that question because I did the same presentation to the Safe Routes Advisory Committee, and that was their question, was what is included in other. And here's from Travis. It was created as kind of a catch-all where things that didn't really fit anywhere else. And all right, if you guys don't mind me just kind of like sharing a screen instead of listing all this out for you, can you guys see an email from Travis?
Yes.
These are the things that go in the other category and how much goes along with it. So it's things like state planning and research, carbon reduction program, protect program, which is a planning program, 82nd Avenue. So some of these things actually include some ped bike stuff, but it didn't fit cleanly in the ped bike category and the PAT, the public and active transportation. So things like that, a lot of the 82nd Avenue actually went towards pedestrian and bicycle facilities, state bridge inspection, O&M federalization, ICAP, dedicated programs, workforce development, and climate planning. So ICAP and O&M, I'm not completely sure what those are. I think that there might be a little additional information I can do about that, research about those things. But if this answers your question, this is what I
Well,
know.
my real thought was, why did it go up significantly when everything else went down? So if that's because of something like 40 million or 4 million or for climate change, well, okay, that should probably go up. If it's for something like bridge inspections, which is a pretty big chunk, why did that get to go up when everything else had to go down? You know, it's but I don't want to dive into the nitty gritty. I was just curious if there was anybody knew why that number went up, and I think the answer is no, so that's okay.
Yeah, and my guess is what was in the other category is probably similar to what is in this category, but because it's a catch-all, it probably has some new things in that category that weren't included there before. That would be my guess, but again, I'm doing a little bit of guessing.
I was just wondering really quick, is the 82nd Avenue referenced 82nd Avenue in Portland?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And probably the reason why a lot of it's shorthand is because it was just in an email that Travis sent as opposed to something a little more public. But yeah, that's the 82nd Avenue in Portland. The jurisdictional transfer that went through was kind of hinged on the funding.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Leanne? Because we are running up against our next subject. Beth, you're shaking your head as in, do you have more? No. And Emma did put something in the chat that said, I'd like to see if anybody would be willing to go to the next OTC and meeting and comment. What exact comment are you looking for?
Well, if we were to comment, I think we need to agree as a committee what the person would speak to. It's November 14th in the Corvallis and Albany area. I think a comment about the fact that we don't have maintenance funding sources for off-street paths and to some extent other bike ped infrastructure could be a good comment to voice. we don't have the response back from the question regarding the leverage and what it's consisting of. So maybe it's too much. I'm just trying to navigate this sequencing of timing and saying we're not going to meet until after that next meeting. But I think the OTC hearing from us, especially on funding decisions, is pretty important.
Do we have anybody in that Corvallis area that it would be less of a pain than, like, oh, for example, me to go there too?
What was the date again?
November 14th.
I'm not volunteering, but maybe we could write a letter.
And it could be virtual too. I mean, even though it's an in-person meeting, you could comment virtually.
Okay.
And maybe it's just commenting. I mean, we could skip this now and just highlight the issue later, because I don't know that the maintenance topic is going to be addressed by their November STIP decision. But I think that it's important to highlight that at some point, since there's a lot of money being put towards maintenance. And guess what? Off-street paths don't have any connection to that.
I think that there's a little bit of an advantage to providing public comment specifically about maintenance in that, like, it's the people are talking about 2025 legislative session as well. And I think that what you're saying is really important. And so even if it's within the context of the OTC and the STIP, I think that it's also relevant for any future transportation funding, and potentially a good thing to keep talking about.
Do we have anybody that would be amenable to going to that to present?
I would, but I'm just not available that day. Sorry.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry, that whole week I'm out.
I could maybe do, if it's online, I might be able to do it, but it also depends on what time it is.
Usually in the morning. The public comments usually in the morning. It's close to the first thing.
Okay. Because I'm busy from 11 to 3:30 that day.
I think it'd be before that.
Okay. Then I couldn't get to Corvallis, but I could do it online if it's a Zoom thing.
Where do you live, Nolan?
I'm going to the University of Oregon right now, so I'm in Eugene, but I'm from Portland and I've lived there my whole life, so I know the state well. I've been around the block a few times, but yeah, right now I'm in Eugene.
Cool. So you're volunteering?
I will if it's online, yeah. And I also don't know. I have zero clue. I probably need to do, if I do it, I would need to talk to Emma, because I have literally like no idea what it's about. So
Nolan, let's go on a bike ride and I'll explain the process and support you.
Okay.
And it's a great like development opportunity for you to learn the ropes of how do we comment to OTC and navigate the system. Let's do that.
Great.
All right,
Yeah,
so let's keep moving on. So Emma and Nolan, you guys are gonna get together and come up with a plan of attack for the next OTC meeting. Does anybody else want to be part of that conversation? Speak now. Use your voice. Okay, hearing none, you guys are it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We're going on to the work plan. So I know that the new members are probably like, oh my God, we always talk about this work plan. It's horrible. But I just wanted to bring it up and talk about historically. The work plan has been this thing that we get together once a year and we're like, what do we want to do? How do we want to change the world? And then they lead us through this big thing and then we come up with a work plan, and people that are very intense about different parts of the work plan sign up for those portions of the work plan and drive them. So basically this big work plan document that you've seen that is super overwhelming and huge, it is more of a map that is kind of used by the staff more than the individuals. So what I really want to do is get back to the work plan is something that we come with up with as a group, people own it, and then we go on instead of just talking about the work plan. So part of this is scheduling that in-person time to review and come up with an updated work plan so that we can do that. We can get new individuals into the plan so that you guys are feeling heard, like you guys are working on something that you want to be on OPAC to push. Leanne, is there something specific that we need to do other than talking about the work plan?
I mean, I'm a little bit new to this too, so I believe it's a time for people whose name is next to an item on the work plan to check in about that item. The interesting thing that's going on here is that with all of the turnover, there are many people who are listed on the work plan that have moved on. Our new members haven't really had an opportunity to sign up for anything yet, we haven't really set a time for that sort of workshop to happen. So I think that there's an opportunity to decide, hey, we want to use our January meeting to kick off the new year right, and we might have some people in person because it'll be right after the equity training to do a nice big like work planning session where we can bring new people on to those groups. If you're looking at the agenda right now, you'll notice that there's some areas. There's sort of network development and advocacy, there's funding programs and committee health. And our committee has had a complete turnover. So basically we need more people to sign up for things to be able to use this time as a moment to report out to the group on the things that you've been working on. And usually work happens, I believe, in subcommittees. So you kind of volunteer for something, and then a subcommittee gets together on the side and then uses this time to report back. So I believe there are two things that y'all can work on right now if you want to, but feel free to push back on this. One is deciding when you want to do that work planning workshop. Two is I think that there actually is an update from the outreach committee, which was Beth, Dell, and Lauren, that is fairly timely. So Lauren, before she left, provided some information about that. And I believe that Beth might even have a discussion topic for the group. I don't know if you want,
Well, I do, but I'm thinking that to save time, maybe we can push it to the next meeting. Is my thought, because we're going to be asking opinions of OBPAC members based on Lauren's top 10, Lauren's top 5, and I can give a quick overview of what they are, and we can decide next time, like think about what you want, but we don't have to go into a deep discussion of it this time. I'm thinking to save time because we're a little behind.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is I am proposing that we set a date that we are going to work with the plan and polish it up for all of our new committee members and make sure that everybody is feeling solid on taking over different portions. And I want to throw out there that we've had like a lot of tech and a lot of other things that have been part of this committee that have kind of wandered off with different individuals that, that is when that conversation needs to happen so that we're making sure that people are working towards what they're passionate about. So that's part of the conversation. Michael, do you have something to add to that?
Who has something to add?
Not to that part, no.
Okay, so just to kind of make sure that we're heading in the right direction, can I have a thumbs up with the idea of that we are going to rework the plan in person moving forward, and so that everybody is going to be owning it, reworking it a little bit as an in-person thing? Are we okay with this? Okay, so Leanne, put that down for like our January meeting. That suggestion you had was perfect. Okay, so moving on from that, we still have our old work plan, which has not been adjusted yet, but we have all these individuals that have been doing all sorts of great things all over the state. So let's go ahead and do a brief check-in with those guys. Although, Michael, do you have something you want to say? Your hand's still up, which is why I'm asking.
Yeah, I put it back up, but my comment can wait until after everybody gives their report, because I want to volunteer for another area. So.
Okay, fantastic. So local outreach, that was Beth, Dell, and Lauren. Did you guys have anything?
Okay, I'm gonna just tell the new folks what we've done so far and what point we're at now. So you may have noticed Lauren's top 5. That's a result of 3 outreach meetings, 1 in person at the Oregon Active Transportation Summit, which was May of this year, I think. Okay, and then we've had since then, and then we've had 2 more. It started with a letter to all local bike ped advisory committees. Some of them have different names, but we reached out to whoever we had a list of based on a few things, talking to people, but also there was a list, very outdated list online, because there is a whole page, an outreach, a local bike ped page on the ODOT website. So anyway, we had these meetings and lots of good ideas came out, and then Lauren compiled these, and I don't think I need to read them, or I don't know if we have the time to do that, but I would just suggest you guys, if you want to comment, you can comment now on her list, or we could wait until the next meeting. We've waited this long to take any action. I think 2 more months would not be a big deal. What do you guys think?
When I looked at that list, they seemed things that were very succinct. It was just like compiling information so that people can find that. And I personally, I feel like that is something that we can kick off to our handlers. I know it's not going to be Leanne, but it is going to be Dorian.
Yeah,
and
we would probably
I
need
would
to
encourage.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just I don't want to. I can't commit things for Dorian at this point with her workload, and we are still down a bunch of staff. So what I would say is that if I think a homework for staff could be before your work planning meeting to go through some of this stuff, and if you're looking at this list and you're like, oh, this is all stuff ODOT staff should be doing, then we can look at that and we can say, yes, we can do this. No, we can't do this. We do have the capacity to staff an advisory committee, but we don't really have the capacity to take on a lot of additional work for the state. And so we'll go there. We'd have to work with managers to see where the capacity might be, but we could take that as homework before your work program meeting in January to be able to come back and say, these are the things we can do, and these are the things, like, if y'all want to work on that as a committee, you would need to put some time into that.
I think that would be very beneficial.
I think for the November meeting, maybe we could decide if we want to do all these or which ones we want to do, number 1, and number 2, who's going to do them, and is it going to be staff, or is it going to be one of us? Is the outreach committee people or person going to be taking these on, and also long term with these things, because some of them are changes that need to be maintained. Most of them need to be updated. Newsletters, keeping a list of local bike peds online, and contact people, which changes constantly. So we're talking, and this piece of paper is a lot of work, a lot of person hours. And so I think we need to decide as a group how much we want to ask of ODOT and how much we want to take on. So I'd like to do that in November.
I think I think that may be jumping the gun because honestly, I want to see what they're like. Oh yeah, we're already doing this because I look at the list and there's already a lot of things that I think that they are doing that maybe the information just isn't getting where it needs to be. So if we can figure out a little bit more of diversion, what is already happening out of that list, because I mean, for example, right? I'm in business. I have a huge building. Anytime I change things, it takes 3 years for people to figure it out. Like seriously, 3 years. So
Did we get an
I think a lot of these
person to report to us in November how much they are doing? Leanne, I guess it won't be you, but could we ask that of the new OBPAC liaison?
Yeah, I think we can go through the list of recommendations and find out like what is ODOT currently doing and what is ODOT not currently doing. We can bring back in November.
Okay.
Wonderful.
And then
Okay.
we can have that OBPAC member, ODOT person report to us in the November meeting, because some of them could be jointly done.
Yep. And
Okay,
it's,
Dorian. Great.
It's Dorian.
Okay. There you are.
Thanks, Dorian.
Okay, does everybody
And-
else, including the new people, understand what this OBPAC outreach is? I'm gonna go one step before that is, I inherited it based on a decision that, we inherited, I should say, Dell and me, based on decisions that were made by OBPAC before we joined. And that basically, I think the idea is just, to increase our base of support. And when we say things, we kind of a political thing, when not only support them, but they support us, that we're not offbeat, that this is what the local bike ped people feel, and these are the things they're facing. So out of that came this question thing, and a lot of service. What came out of that is a lot of services we could offer to these local bike ped groups. So there you are.
Thank you. And as everybody notes, Lauren was on this and she is stepping off the committee, but it would be nice if we were, if public outreach is something that you like to do, there's a position here on this committee. Moving on.
Come on in.
Mobility and the MAC. Emma, do we have anything to say about MAC?
Yeah, continues to be a whole lot of, oh, yeah, it's gonna go somewhere maybe. I think that's the summary. We have a hold on the calendar for the OBPAC chairs, myself and Lake McTighe, who works at Metro and has been part of a working group previously to weigh in on the development of the MAC charter. So the MAC is the Mobility Advisory Committee. Essentially, it's a lot of freight interested stakeholder kind of people, and they provide what should be advice to ODOT, but in practice has been the approval on projects. There's been a lot of projects where freight interests don't want to narrow lanes because of needing to get big commercial freight trucks through different corridors, and people wanting to be able to walk and bike on the same street and do so safely. So it's basically a committee that's held a lot of power within the agency and has overstepped their actual purview and what the committee was set up in statute to do and not do. And so we've continued to provide comments. There was another round of, oh, we're looking at the charter again, please provide comments. And we're like, why provide comments if you didn't listen to us the first, second, and third time? So we hopefully will have a meeting in October with ODOT leadership and try to figure out a more productive way to move forward. There's a big question mark as to, do we keep pursuing this or do we drop it? Hopefully after that October meeting, I'll have a better update for you in November.
Thank you. I really, this is my example of, I want all the committee to be on the same table playing the same game, because this is not everybody on the same playing field playing the same game. So that's why we're this interested in this committee. All right, Dell.
Yes, the scenic bikeways. We did have a Zoom meeting last month. As you all probably know, the Scenic Bikeways Committee has basically been turned over to Cycle Oregon. And so Clint Culpepper and Steve there are sort of taking it over. There's a few things on the back burner. We have not had a in-person meeting. There's some changes that are under consideration, and I don't know how many hoops we have to jump through to get those approved, but mostly safety improvements to the original scenic bikeway, which is the Willamette Valley one. The Osterheide one is a new one that's been considered since before the pandemic and sort of been put on hold before that. We had hoped to get a exploratory group ride out there before the end of the season, but again, things have been going very slow since the pandemic, and I'm not sure what's happening. But we did have one meeting, and then just a couple of weeks ago, a woman named Erin from Pepper Foster set up a one-on-one Zoom meeting with me and apparently with other members of the group too, just to introduce herself and ask for some feedback. So she's sort of putting, I guess they've farmed out some sort of a work plan going forward. I don't know much about it yet. So that's what's happening with scenic bikeways. There's a little bit of momentum there, but nowhere near as much as there was before the pandemic. So.
Now I have a question.
Yes.
When you say it's Cycle Oregon now, so this is a subcommittee of, or what is this group? Is it
Cycle
part
Oregon?
of? No, I know what Cycle Oregon is, but what's the Scenic Bikeways group? Is it
it's
a ODOT thing?
It's a subcommittee from sort of like OBPAC is from Oregon Parks and Recreation.
Oh, okay. It's a Parks and Recreation subcommittee.
Yeah.
Okay. Advisory committee. Okay.
Right.
And when you say Cycle Oregon is doing it, is, I mean, physically or just Cycle Oregon people are on the committee?
They basically Oregon Parks basically turned this whole program over to Cycle Oregon.
Oh, so is it an advisory committee though to Oregon Parks and Rec?
I guess we're sort of an advisory committee to Cycle Oregon now. It's a little bit in limbo.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dell, recreational trails.
This is another one that's been pretty dormant ever since coming out of the pandemic. You probably all know that Jody has taken on some new responsibilities, and she was like the main motivator behind this committee. We have not had a meeting this year. Our last meeting was last fall, and we had some trail reviews that were supposed to happen this year, but none of them ever came up. So the committee is pretty dormant, unfortunately.
Is there anything we can do to push that so that it's not dormant?
I don't know. It's really pretty disappointing that it's been this dormant. I guess we'd have to check with somebody in Parks Department. And like I said, Jody was the go-to person, and she has been reassigned for I think for just 1 year. So I wish I knew more.
All right. Well, thank you for taking those on, and anything that you can bring back to us that we can kind of keep the ball rolling so that these programs are being successful, please let us know.
Yeah, I wish I had more good news for that.
Andre, do you have anything about e-bikes?
Nothing about e-bikes at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Funding program. Emma, Andre.
Commented at OTC, as we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
And I think Andre and I will connect, check in sometime between now and our next meeting so that we can provide a little bit more structure as to where we're headed next. And I appreciate Nolan volunteering and being willing to go comment in front of OTC in November at the virtual part of that meeting. So that's where we're at. And then I think 2025 legislative session is going to be the next bigger transportation funding package, hopefully. So I think we need to start thinking towards that and figuring out how we can partner with different organizations. I see potential tie-ins to the local bike ped reps and committees as an opportunity to develop relationships, broaden a network, and influence the 2025 what happens with funding or not.
Right. Thank you very much. Oh,
quick comment. Sorry, I do have an e-bike announcement. I think it's just sort of a point of joy to share with you all. There was actually a ribbon cutting. Shout out to the city of Tigard. They received the Portland General Electric Drive Change Fund, and they cited e-bike libraries on affordable housing units, which is I think probably one of the best models out there. So I just wanted to shout out the planners in Tigard for doing really good work, and potentially a place for us to explore as a committee as well. So
Andre, what's a e-bike library?
So yeah, essentially residents of those affordable housing units have access to those e-bikes, so they can go down and grab them and return them right to their units. And I think just sort of, this cross-pollination between housing and transportation is critical. So yeah, really, really exciting stuff and a great model happening right here in Oregon.
Yeah, Library of Things is a new thing in Newport, at least, and that's a good route, especially for low-income places to go. And I'm just trying to get more bike racks and lockable ones in our affordable housing structures, because they sometimes they can't carry their bikes up and down. Sometimes they're very small residences. It's just, yeah, so that's a whole other thing. But the library is pretty cool with e-bikes. E-bikes are great in that I feel that they open up the world of bicycling for the average person, a real great gateway, or you just stopping in there with an e-bike like I have now.
There you go. Same here.
Okay, bye.
okay. Thank you for a win. I needed one. All right. Moving on to the next was actually me, Safe Routes to School. Things are moving on. They're trying to make it so that smaller towns don't necessarily have to have that high match that they have historically had. I'm very excited that they are moving in that direction, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going. Parks and Rec grant, I got this beautiful email that showed all these. We gave away millions. We gave away millions of dollars to parks, and I got this huge list of all the parks that were getting funded and what they were doing, and it is so awesome to see. And
Michael, what are you saying?
Is our new dude. Well, he's taking it on. So I'm just saying I got the list, but now it's Mike. Go.
Yeah. So, and I'm also one of the recipients. We just got awarded $500,000 in LGGP funding for our Concord Park and Playground project. So that's very exciting. And yes, I have nothing to report on the other side of that. Mavis, you and I need to figure out how to do an official handoff and so that I'm on the right lists that are getting mailings of what I'm supposed to be doing as part of that. So we just need to make it official. But I'm very happy to serve in that capacity. It's a great program that we're able to put on, and with good use of lottery proceeds.
Michael,
yeah.
I can't remember where you're from, who you're with.
I'm
Sorry.
North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Director. So I serve Milwaukee and a good chunk of North Clackamas County, about 110,000 people.
Cool.
Yep. And the only other thing I had said I wanted to volunteer for something, Andre, I would love to join your e-bike committee. I am an avid e-biker and an advocate for disabled e-biking. I'm coming from a disabled vet perspective. That e-bikes are what allow me to go out and enjoy trails now. And so I've got quite a collection, as my wife likes to point out. So if you would like help on that, I'd love to join that and be part of the discussion.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Leadership support and education. Anybody have anything?
No. I think it's mostly been MAC related and we're not making a whole lot of progress there yet. And there's been a lot of turnover as well. I just will note for new members, we had a meeting with ODOT executives in November and 2 out of the 3 division administrators have since left the organization. So there's an opportunity to build relationships with people as they get hired into the positions, but there's been that challenge as well.
Yes. OTP, I don't have anything new to add. And then committee health, we discussed this earlier. Wait, Emma, what is it?
I got an email, I think the rest of us did, that we can get copies of the Oregon Transportation Plan. I just requested a paper copy of the executive summary because that's a reasonable number of pages and few trees to kill to have something handy for reference. I'm excited to look at it a little bit more, and I just want to say thanks, Mavis, for your service on this. I think it's important to know kind of what's happening agency-wide with some of these key transportation planning and policy establishment documents.
There's a lot of pretty words in there. Come on, Emma, make them happen. All right, committee health. We have come to the point where we need more people, and who would like to be part of the group that gets to go through all the applications and all that good stuff? Because they're all gone. There used to be 3 people doing this. Now there are none people doing this. Do we have any volunteers that I can kind of kick it towards?
If I may know, does anyone know how much time it took for the last people to find or to get everyone and send them off to the governor?
It is not a fast process.
I'm wondering if Roberto or Jessica have sort of a rough number of how many hours the subcommittee spent.
Yeah, so we had about 48 applicants. We send out the applications for folks to review. I would say that took about 2 hours of their personal time. 5 folks were selected, and we interview each of those folks. So that took 30 minutes per person, and then we reconvened together for another hour. So that's 2,
like 11
3,
hours?
4, 5, 6, about 6 hours, I would say.
I guess I estimated a little bit more. Going through 48 applications might take a little bit longer than 2 hours, but maybe not.
I'm a slow reader, so it took me longer than 2
Yeah, I would estimate 10 hours of time commitment per recruitment.
And we're only filling one position, right?
Potentially more depending on the conversation in November if committee members are interested in moving to an ex officio status to open up more.
Okay, yeah. Can I decide in November? But probably.
Okay, we'll put you down as a tentative.
Okay.
Come on, you know
anybody
you want to
else
do
that-
it. Come on.
I don't know what my schedule is going to be like next term. So that's
I understand.
yeah.
All right, Dave, you raised your hand. Let's go
Yeah,
ahead and put Dave and
I'm
Millen.
willing to participate.
Fantastic. Andre, how about you?
Yay.
No? Okay. All right. I would love to see one more group person on this group. When you go down and have a glass of wine tonight, kind of think about joining Nolan and Dave, if you would. Andre, did you have something to say?
Yeah, sorry, my computer was being slow. Yeah, I think, yes, I have a general, I mean, obviously I'm very interested in this subject matter, but I also want to trust that anyone on this committee would want the same outcomes that I want to see. And so I want to believe that I don't need to be in the room, you know, for us to get the outcomes that we agreed upon. And we still need to agree upon what outcomes we want to see, but that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yes, and we will discuss that next time. Dorian.
Hi. So I haven't gotten a chance to get to know you all or work with you yet. But I was, going through some of the materials to prepare for listening in and listening to you all discuss. And so I know that you all can't review applications as a committee as a whole, given public meeting laws. But I just wanted to throw out a suggestion for you all to consider or discuss together. But what if there was a potential workaround in that you create several work groups, maybe 2 or 3, and then everyone can donate a couple of hours of their time to kind of split up the applications? I've seen that done in the past. And so one person or the folks who are reviewing applications don't have to do all of them. And then that could be a way for folks to be more involved in the process, since there are only 8 folks in the committee. I don't know, but I just want to throw that out there as maybe something that could work, or maybe something we could do differently to increase engagement and participation and split the workload.
Thank you for that. We are running behind time, but Jessica, I do believe we want to focus on some safety.
Yeah. Let me get my screen share going here real quick. On my 3rd remote working application for the day. So it's just going to take me a second to remember how this one works. All right. So thank you everybody for having me back. And I want to do one more quick tweak so I can see all your beautiful faces. There we go. Okay, ready to go. So for those of you I haven't had the chance to meet who are new, I'm Jessica Horning. I'm the PedBike program manager who's currently doing rotation in traffic roadway over in our delivery and operations group, working on helping with some active transportation and safety integration work that the agency is doing. And I'm here today to give you an update on the Oregon Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment, which we talked about a little bit in July because we were just kicking off this work then. So I'll give a refresher for new folks and just for everybody, because hearing things more than once is always good. And this is some kind of core safety lingo and concepts and stats that are, I think, pretty important for OBPAC and the work you are all doing. So we'll do a little refresher and then let you know what we've been working on since July and where we're going from here. So why we're focusing on this is vulnerable road users, just to get us all on the same page with language before we start. When we're talking about vulnerable road users, that's complete streets, vision zero lingo for folks who are outside the protection of a metal shell of a motor vehicle or a truck. And we call them vulnerable users because they are more vulnerable to impacts, to injury, to death in traffic collisions. So we're talking about people walking, people biking, scooting, rolling, using mobility devices. We're even talking about highway workers that are on foot in work zones because they're vulnerable in their work environment. They're on foot. So they're considered pedestrians in crash data. Sometimes people will also include motorcycle drivers in the vulnerable user definition because they have a very high fatality and injury rate compared to other road users as well, and don't quite have that shell of protection. But we're not including them in this work based on instructions from Federal Highway Administration. So just talking about walking, biking, rolling this. And the reason that we are focused on vulnerable road users is because nationally, we are at a 35-year high for vulnerable road user and especially pedestrian fatalities. And then nationally, that national trend is also reflected in Oregon, where we have had I didn't get this set up, so I have my talking points with my specific numbers, but basically we had a significant increase between 21 and 22 in pedestrian fatalities in Oregon, and that was already a historic high in 2021. And then when we look at those numbers, our most vulnerable communities in Oregon of areas with more low income and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color residents are overrepresented in those fatalities and injuries. So the vulnerable road user safety assessment is really we're trying to get to the root of what is causing that and what can we do about it. So in the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law, some folks also refer to it as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, all the big federal money that came down the pipe a couple years ago. It also included this requirement that every state do a vulnerable road user safety assessment and adopt it into their state highway safety plan by November 15th of this year. So we've got a pretty quick turnaround. And when we're done with this, this will become part of Oregon's Transportation Safety Action Plan. That's the special name we use for that plan in Oregon. And it will become a regular part of that plan that will update along with that plan going forward. There are, with that quick turnaround, some pretty clear requirements from Federal Highways on what should be in this plan. So we've got a lot of number crunching to do and around looking at history, identifying high risk areas, then some engagement with committees like yourselves and community partners. And then once we've identified high risk areas, there's this goal of identifying a program of strategies of what are we going to do as concrete actions to address these risk areas. And the big change, an important filter for all of this work is what we call the safe system approach. So this is the big new thing that Federal Highway Administration is pushing. It's adopted in the new Oregon Transportation Plan that Emma was waving around, as ODOT and Oregon are going to take a safe system approach to improving roadway safety going forward. And just to get at the kind of the root of what safe system approach is, because you all will be hearing it probably a lot at this committee, is it is a bit of an evolution of Vision Zero, where we're going from, like, historically, transportation departments have been very into how do we make the street safer, and what are the engineering solutions for safety problems. And kind of other than that, there's also this human behavior piece that we can't really do anything about. So safe systems is really looking at, well, safety is more than that. It's the 5 or 6 E's kind of framework of safety is a shared responsibility for everybody using the road, the folks designing the road, and recognizing humans are vulnerable to kinetic energy. We're soft, squishy people that if we get hit by hard things at high speeds, we are going to be injured. We are also very error-prone people that need redundancy built into our system so that when we do screw up, that kinetic energy and the environment and everything is managed so that we're not going to be severely hurt, or there's post-crash care and things to take care of people. So this is a pretty exciting lens, and it does look at these 5 areas that we'll talk about a little bit more towards the end, of not just safer roads, but safer people, vehicles, speeds, and the post-crash care. So that is the framework that everything that comes out of the Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment is supposed to take. And what is this thing going to do? Hopefully not sit on a shelf at the end of the day. From Federal Highway Administration, their expectation is that state and local governments are going to use the findings and the strategies from this required process to inform how they select projects and make investments to improve safety going forward. So should have an impact on what gets funded in things like the STIP conversation that OBPAC is providing comments on. So what we've been up to since July is a lot of number crunching, looking at crash location, all the crash data for the last 5 years, and looking at risk factors. So not just chasing where crashes have happened before, but what can we learn about the road and where it's more likely, we're more likely to have crashes involving vulnerable users, even if we haven't had them yet. And just to give a real quick snippet of some of the stuff that is going to be in this report, we've looked at the primary contributing factors in pedestrian-involved fatal and serious injury crashes. And I will note that this particular bit of data is based on police reports. So that's folks who witnessed the crash, drivers who were involved in the crash, may or may not involve the vulnerable user involved in that crash because they are in serious condition or not around anymore to provide their feedback. So that's a filter for this data. But with pedestrians, with this data, there are 3 big things that are popping out with pedestrian crashes of non-motorists illegally being in roadway. So this is folks like crossing the interstate where it is illegal for people outside of their car to be if they're not in the shoulder. But then also so that was 28% of crashes. 24% is motorists not yielding right of way. So it gets to that safe systems. This is everybody's got a piece of this and what's happening on our roads. Another interesting piece is 61% of our pedestrian fatal and serious injury crashes over the last 5 years were on roadway segments rather than on intersections. So that's maybe a little bit differently than how we've thought about some of these crashes before. On the bicycling side of things, one super major contributing factor that pops out above all the others in terms of bicyclists involved fatal and serious injury crashes is motorists not yielding right of way to cyclists in the roadway. So that's over a third of our fatal and serious injury crashes involving people biking. And then interestingly, when it comes to people biking, we're seeing the majority of those happening at intersections rather than along the roadway. So we're looking at a lot of things like that to give us clues of which strategies to be looking at. We also did an overrepresentation analysis of a few things just to see, like, based on population or vehicle miles traveled on roads, where areas where we're seeing overrepresentation of crashes. And this table just shows, we looked again at that, at the latest crash data and the latest census data, and kind of re-verified that research that Josh Roll did a few years ago with some older data about high equity areas being overrepresented in our pedestrian fatal and serious injury crashes. So that's the crash history piece. On the systemic risk factors piece, there's not probably a lot of things that are surprising to you all in terms of what the numbers are showing us are roadway characteristics where we're going to expect more crashes in the future, even if we haven't seen them in the past. And that is more lanes, more traffic, higher speed, arterial arterial or collector functional classification, which kind of means more lanes, more speed, more vehicles. And then also that high equity, social equity index location, and where do we have more generators like schools or bus stops? So we've got more vulnerable users on the street and less facilities. So we don't have a shoulder of a minimum width in rural areas. We don't have street lighting. What we're doing with all this is we have compiled for the state and local network, our high injury network that shows highlights where we have the most crash history, and our high risk network that shows where we have the most of those risk factors. And what we're working on now is figuring out how do we identify those high risk facilities, combine those two pieces to figure out the high risk facilities that we're going to focus on for the program of strategies. And we've created for the internal team this web map with a bunch of different ways that like basically we just get around the table. How about if we cut it this way? What would it look like if we did this? And are looking at crash history. We have been trying to normalize that by crashes per mile. So that's a little bit more normalized across the system. And with the risk score, that's pretty much already an index. What we're trying to figure out is a policy question that we'd love your input on is how do we combine those, and how do we weight them? Do we put equal value on the crash history and the crash risk factors, or do we weight the crash risk factors more than the history? So we're really focusing more on maybe there hasn't been a crash here yet, but we want to focus on encouraging people to do systemic improvements before a crash happens. So what we've been looking at thus far that you can kind of see in the side in this graphic is like you can weight them 50-50, you can weight them 80-20, we can do it 90-10, we can do kind of any combination of that. So I'm going to pause and ask if folks have thoughts on this bit first.
I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I guess my comment on that would be that when we did the transportation safety action plans for Deschutes County and Bend, a lot of cases, those numbers for a particular intersection are so small. I mean, so you had 2 fatalities at this intersection, you had none at one 3 blocks away that looks exactly the same. That's just kind of random chance more than real data. And so from that perspective, I'd say when you get really small numbers like that the risk score is probably a better indicator than where things have actually happened, just because the statistics are pretty weak. Now, I don't know that that's the case in Portland, for example, but it was here. Thanks.
I'll say something. I like going with the crash risk factors, maybe because I'm a planner, but like Dave said, there's luckily so few actual deaths that is kind of, well, I won't repeat what Dave said. He said it better. But I will add that sometimes people avoid intersections, lowering the livability factor in that community, if you will. There, especially in this town, there are many streets that bikes and pedestrians have to avoid, and they learn to do it, or if they're tourists, they don't learn to do it. Anyway, I really like supporting the crash risk factors versus actual crashes.
Any other thoughts on this one? Okay.
Yeah, I think the risk score is important. I witnessed a bicycle car crash in Eugene last week when I was biking over there, and I thought about the interaction between the two individuals. Essentially, the person who had been on a bike was in shock and was kind of enraged and talking to the car driver and not getting to a point where it would be reported or they could even exchange information regarding insurance. I mean, I hope that that individual could get the body work and care that he actually needs after being impacted. And yet, depending on people's interactions at a systemic level with society and health insurance and police interactions, I think there's more unreported crashes that could be accounted for if we took the risk score approach, but wouldn't be showing up in the crash history. Granted, that's more for those situations like what I witnessed where it's not a severe or a fatal crash. But I think that the risk score, to Beth's point, there's going to be people who have to walk and bike in certain places. People who prefer not to and have the ability to drive may very well be driving. But that just increased the risk even more if there's lower numbers using, and it's a very unsafe environment to be walking and biking in.
Thanks, Emmett. So
I'll just kind of add, kind of like garbage in, garbage out is what I'm thinking.
So I'm hearing fairly broad consensus on weighting risk higher than our crash history. Does anybody have concerns with that approach or other thoughts that they'd like to share before I move to the next one? All right. Well, if you come up with thoughts later, you know where to find me. So we are working on finalizing whatever approach we're going to use for that identifying high-risk locations. And then the next step is refining our program of strategies. And for this piece, what we've got in our draft, in our super initial rough draft internal version of this report right now, is a lot around safer roads, because we know we've got a long laundry list of crash modification factors for different roadway improvements, which is basically like, we know based on experience and research that if we're going to, that where we have these types of problems, if we do a road diet or lane reallocation, changing 4 lanes for cars into 3 lanes with some bike facilities, that we're gonna see like about a 35% reduction in crashes for everybody when we do that. So that part we've got a lot to work from, but these other lenses from the safe system approach are a little bit newer for us. So just wanted to put this out here again with that graphic, just so the group kind of gets familiar with it and have open conversation about any thoughts you all have about this approach and the other areas of the safe system, things you'd like to see like us to be looking into for strategies.
I love the safe systems approach. It's holistic. It's the way it always should have been. That's all I have to say.
It makes a lot of intuitive sense, and is a lot harder to kind of go, but 0 isn't a realistic goal.
I have a problem with it, actually.
Yeah.
The safer people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is the walkers and bikers of the world that need to be safer people. And I almost find it offensive. It doesn't happen very often.
Well, people driving are included in safer.
It doesn't look like it.
Can you see my little mouse?
I can.
Oh.
Yeah,
So
I didn't recognize that as a driver either. Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll work on the graphic.
Okay.
But that is supposed to be inclusive of people driving.
I agree with Mavis, though. At least I was raised during the safer bikes to school, or the like walk bike to school era, and I've been through all of that. And I don't know if it's improved since like late 2000s era, but like it was there were the kids that did it and there were kids that didn't, and it was just purely based off of like if it was all out of convenience, and that's what everything has always been about with like the logistics of moving people around is just the convenience. And I don't think a person riding a bicycle will necessarily put on a bike helmet before they leave because they're like, oh, this is safer. They'll instead just not go on a bike ride. But if the bike path feels safe to them and their path is convenient, then they'll go bike, if that makes sense. I don't know if that was a very good way of explaining it, but I feel like the engineering is still like the vast majority of it. And it's also because I feel like ODOT doesn't really have a lot of control. Like, how are you going to adjust post crash care? Like, you don't have medical authority in any manner or anything like that.
Yeah. So the post crash, I guess one thing so there are some connections with ODOT with post crash care in terms of we do have an incident response role. So when a crash happens, it is ODOT usually that gets called out and is doing traffic control to help be able to help first responders get there. A lot of the times our district or maintenance crew might be the first folks on the scene of a crash. But then also this is, while it's ODOT that's leading this work, the end product that is the safety assessment is supposed to be a program of strategies for everybody in the state. So strategies for ODOT, strategies for local agencies, strategies for first responders and other folks. So going back to that responsibility is shared piece of the safe systems approach. It's not just ODOT or even just DOTs. It's other agencies that we need to develop working relationships and partnerships with if we're gonna tackle this kind of tough systems issue.
Okay, I love this conversation. I love where it's going. We're out of time. Sorry.
I was saving because I went first last time. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say I'm very concerned. I love the approach, but when you look at the pieces of that pie, I will bet you that 98% of ODOT's effort ends up going towards engineering, just like it always has, because the others are much harder. And saying we can't do anything about speed, that one's just the biggest problem, and it's a really hard problem, but nobody's going to attack it. I bring it up every time I get a chance, and we're not attacking it here.
Right.
So,
well,
my thoughts.
If you have the plan of attack that you've always wanted to see in writing, so you can wave it in people's face, this is the time to bring it up and get it in that draft. And real quick, Mavis, just like where we're going from here. And it says in your agenda that we were going to have a draft for review available tomorrow. Rather than give our public partners a draft that is not going to be quite as useful for you all to review, it's still pretty rough. We are going to take another week or two to get that shaped up so that it is still very preliminary draft that has lots of opportunity to be shaped by your input, but makes a little bit more sense than what we've got it in the form it's in right now. So look forward to hearing from me and Dorian with a link to that in the next few weeks. And since that is due it has to be adopted by November 15th, which is before your next meeting. If you wanted to have a group, if there are folks who are interested that wanted to get together to provide comment on behalf of OBPAC with the committee's blessing, that would be a very helpful thing for the project team.
Oh, yes, please. Can we get rid of your slideshow so I can see people? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to pressure people when I can't see them.
Yep.
Here we go.
Pressure away.
Okay, so I do think that this is a pretty important thing. Some of you more techie people that like to read things. Anybody? Emma, Dave, Nolan, you guys are the perfect committee for this. Please tackle that. Do we need a motion?
I am unclear on when y'all need to vote on things and when you don't. So if anybody knows for sure if this needs a vote, go ahead. But I don't think so if it's just people volunteering for it.
If you are just submitting comments for yourselves as Dave, Emma, and actually I need a reminder of who all raised their hands because I was writing a note.
Emma Nolan.
Huh?
Dave, Emma, Nolan.
Dave, Emma, Nolan. Then you don't need a motion. If Dave, Emma, and Nolan are going to submit comments on behalf of OBPAC, then technically you should have a motion.
Thank you, Jessica.
I will move because I think it gives more weight and makes it more impactful. So I move that myself, Dave, and Nolan review the vulnerable road user assessment draft report in October, have a small group discussion about it, and submit comments on behalf of OBPAC before whatever deadline it is.
Is that a second, Nolan? Perfect. All those in favor, let me see your thumbs. Dave, are you? Oh, you can't. Motion passes.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Okay. We kind of already did the round table. Did anybody else have anything that they needed to add? Keep in mind we are running out of time. Dave.
Real quick, mostly for Andre and the e-bike stuff. As you may know, Emerson Levy, one of our state reps over here in Central Oregon, is talking about submitting legislation to change the definitions around e-bikes. We've invited her to come speak at our Central Oregon Bike Ped Summit next month, or well, November. So if you want to talk about that at any point, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave.
Any other round tables? Wonderful. Agenda build for our next meeting, which is in November. We currently have statewide transportation improvement program, the vulnerable user assessment adoption, equity training, strategic action plan update possibly.
Outreach.
Oh, yeah, can we make sure we get outreach on that? Because we do need to recruit. Thank you, Michael. Do we have any other agenda build items that we need put on here?
The other things I pulled from your discussions were how other committees meet the statute, prep for OBPAC recruitment. So we want to prep for the next recruitment. I think that's all I grabbed. Oh, figure out the July in-person meeting. How many days? Where are y'all thinking about so that staff can start getting on the logistics for that one?
Perfect. I like both of those things. Can we also do what's that thing I hate? Technology. Can we learn a little bit more about tech again? Revisit that with how like the interface between e-bikes and people and road users, and we've had a couple spiels about that. If we have time, I would love to be kind of updated on how the tech world is, because I know last time we had this conversation, it was wonderful because they were talking about like truck ponies, where one truck actually had a person in it, and it actually wasn't the first truck in the line because people were bad at driving.
Maybe this is
totally
what Adele was working on like 4 years ago with connected and autonomous vehicles.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything?
I second what Mavis said. I would love for OBPAC to eventually have an opinion on where and how these things should go.
Can I ask a clarifying question on the tech question? So is that like is there a subcommittee that you're asking for information? Or are you asking for ODOT to provide more information on technology and transportation? And I might need some more detail on what you're wanting on that, because it's a pretty broad room. I definitely know a person that can talk more about e-bikes, but so if that's the direction that
But
you're
let's just start that conversation next time. And then the following meeting, we'll have formulated an idea of who we want to hear from and what we want to hear from
got it.
them.
Okay, so discussion with the committee, and then you'll ask for a presentation on what you're more
Does
interested
that sound good?
I don't know. Do we have anybody presenting information? Because I'm feeling like we need some information presented it, and it's kind of been getting slouched to the wayside. I want some information coming from ODOT to us, asking our opinions, since that's we're kind of one of our main goals.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Oh, sorry. The Amanda Howell is who I know is working on e-bike stuff. I don't know what's coming down the pike that has an opportunity for external feedback. We can ask for a strategic action plan update from Robin Wilcox. There's generally opportunities for feedback in that arena. Just on the list or that I know the vulnerable road user assessment will have been adopted, so I don't know if you want Jessica to come back and present on how it ended.
Yeah, let's pull that one. We don't need to. I'm glad we had our presentation, but we don't need to necessarily talk about that next time.
We also had an option to bring Alan in to talk about the Oregon community paths, especially around challenges for right-of-way ownership, land ownership, how tough paths are to actually get from planning to completion due to the many different partners in lands that you have to maneuver. And that's something, Mavis, that you've brought up a couple times in the chairs meeting prior to OBPAC meetings. And I've got Alan on standby to come to the next meeting and talk about some of those challenges, and have discussion and have larger discussion around that.
Awesome. I think that would be wonderful with having Alan come in. And then I think that if we could have an e-bike person, a tech person come in and talk to us as well. I know at one point,
if you can narrow it into e-bikes and not just tech in general, I feel like I can do that. I feel like the larger thing I'd need more guidance on.
Dave and Andre, that is your guys' portion of our work plan. Would you guys appreciate this, or would it be kind of redundant?
I think for me, it's about what you all want to know. I feel like I'm fairly stooped in e-bike stuff, but if there's like certain emerging, I think there's a distinction between e-bikes and other emerging technologies. And so that would be one thing to like, just be clear on. How are you feeling, Mavis? Do you have a preference between general emerging tech versus e-bikes at this point?
I think with the e-bikes, it's more like the legislation around it and how we're using the space. Whereas emerging tech, I'm just super curious and I want to know how to like work it in and everything. But you know, this is not just my rodeo. So come on. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm like Andre, I've spent a lot of time looking at the e-bike issues, and the legislation is really the only, the safety issues. I think there's a lot of discussion about, e-bike, getting back to that pie chart about smart e-bike riders and other people not knowing how to drive around e-bikes. That is interesting, but I don't know if this committee wants to spend a lot of time on it.
At this point, Mavis, maybe we could have it be around e-bikes, because that'll be the beginning of maybe a bigger discussion into technologies and stuff. Just give it enough time on the agenda.
I actually think I'm going to kick this one to Dorian and Leanne. You guys suss up something that somebody, I know that ODOT wants our opinion on something. So if we could have a presentation where they are coming in with a secure ask, that is what we're supposed to be here for, and that's what I want to do. Anybody else have anything? It's so great to see everybody's lovely face-ish. And I look forward to seeing you guys in November. Be sure to reach out if you guys are like, oh man, we should have talked about. Let us know. So, because of course our agenda build is pretty loose at this point. So let us know if you have anything where you're like, oh, I really wanted to learn about that. That would be wonderful. Anybody have anything else to say?
Thank you, Mavis.
I just want to appreciate our co-chairs. Thank you so much. I feel like I have a little bit of bandwidth freed up to like dive into some of the content and topics. So thank you both.
Thank you for being so techie. I'm glad everybody has skills that I
I'm
know.
talking with Dave and Nolan. Looking forward to that.
I appreciate you all.
Just text
See
me.
you guys.
Bye.